Hello, Chris Sexton here with TeamHeliPros.com. I have in front of me a beautiful Whiplash 90. I've decided I'd do a build review and video of my build for this wonderful Whiplash that HeliPros was kind enough to send me. I hear wonderful things about this helicopter. I built a Furion 6. Some of you may have seen my video review of that helicopter. It was a great helicopter. It went together very well. I hear wonderful things about this helicopter. It's not my first 90. Built an X7, have a Synergy E7. Have some experience with the bigger birds, but this one I hear such great things about it. I'm truly looking forward to it. A lot of things about it are a little different. Really curious on the battery tray. We'll get into that a little bit later. First, I'll talk about what I'm going to run in my bird. First of all, I have decided to run the Maverick G5 wide chord 710 millimeter flybarless mains. Ron Lund at HeliPros South actually sent me over some Maverick 105 millimeter tails. In there, I'm also going to mate this guy up with a Scorpion HK3 4035 500 kV and the new Scorpion Commander 5 130 amp ESC. Now this is the S-Spec, non-S-Spec model, excuse me. There's no BEC in this. This EEC does come with a Super BEC, rated at some ridiculous amps. Does really well. This is not the S-Spec model. I'm going to run an RX pack. I keep waffling. I think the last post I put on the board said I was going to run a Castlebeck Pro. But I've got a bunch of RX packs laying around. I've got some RX pack adapters I've already built a long time ago. I'm just going to put an RX pack on it and be done with it. This is the ESC I chose because of the built-in phase sensor for Mikado V-Bar 5.2 Pro. This is a full-size V-Bar. I am truly looking forward to that. I have V-Bar on my E7. Put a mini V-Bar on the Furion 6. It was a great package. Flies wonderful. Servos. I decided to go tried and true. BLS 251 tail and BLS 451 cyclics. Nothing horribly fancy there, but it's going to get the job done, I think. I'm going to run these at 6 volt with a step down to 5.2 for the tail. I'm actually going to run a 6.6 volt nickel metal hydride RX pack. I might look at a Lifey pack. I don't know. I've got a 4,000 milliamp nickel metal RX pack already, and rather than hunt and pack, I'm just going to start with that. And I know these servos can handle the 6.6 fully charged. Be more like 6 most of the time anyway, and the regulator will help with the tail servo. So that's pretty much the layout of what I'm going to put on the heli. I'm going to take a break here, get everything out of the box. I'm not going to do a full-on unboxing video. There's a lot of those out there. I'm just going to get everything laid out, sorted out, pull the manual out, and see where we're going to start. Okay, here we are. I've started taking some stuff out of the box. I'll take a minute. Like most helicopter kits, they've got us starting with the head assembly. I don't have a problem with that. It gives us plenty of time to get everything built together. It gives a Loctite lots of time to cure. Obviously, you can use red Loctite on things like pitch arms and spindle bolts. It gives plenty of time. Get the Swashplate together, cured, the bearings greased and everything. Everything's nice tight. Lots of time to set up before you ever try to put it on the bird and ever think about flying. Real quick, and run through a couple of things real fast. As I expected, Miniature Aircraft stuck with the brushed aluminum look. I love that look. It's just different than everybody else. A lot of people like the chrome and bling, polished aluminum look. I like the brushed. Whiplash is nice and neatly engraved into the head. It says Excel right there. Again, integrated swash driver. Love that. Metal arms on the washout arms. plastic links, that's pretty typical these days. I don't have a lot of trouble with that. What appears to be, I don't have it out of the bag yet, but appears to be a 12 millimeter main shaft. If that's not a 12, that plastic protective is awful thick. Beefy. All metal Swashplate. I believe they're using a German Heim joint in that as well, like the Furion. I hear great things about that. I have no problems, absolutely zero slop in my Furion 6 Swashplate. I'm sure that one would be just as nice. Beefy spindle. Inside these arms, I haven't pulled them apart just yet, but you've got 2 radial bearings encapsulating the thrust bearing. They came pre-shipped with thrust bearings in place. I'll pull those out of there, lube everything up. I obviously aren't going to trust that it's lubricated because I can tell from here it's not. I'm not going to bore you with those details. I'll pull it out and lubricate that here in a little bit. One more thing to note, dampeners. They give you these clear urethane. It's a fairly hard dampener. I can squeeze it with my thumbs pretty good though. Traditional dampener, part number 131, 190. But they also, for you hardcore 3D bangers out there, they give us these, the Whiplash 90D dampener, 131, 192. It's a much harder urethane. I assume it's urethane. I'm not sure what it's made of, but it's very hard rubber dampener. Give you some nice flexibility. I'm a fast forward flight. Big 3D, big air, very minor 3D pilot, very little 3D. I'm going to stick with the clear dampeners, but it's nice to know I have those. I'm going to take a minute and pull the blade grips apart, get thrust bearings out, get the Swashplate all tightened up and the balls Loctited, and when we come back I'll have the head a little more together. Well, as you can see, we're making some progress. Here's my Whiplash head assembled. Looks good. I didn't bother shooting video with the thrust bearings. It's pretty straightforward. You've got a radial inner and outer. There's a spacer in there. You've got a carbon fiber washer on the bolt with a 5 millimeter head. It's a massive bolt. Then you've got a thrust bearing, typical, smaller ID outer, larger ID inner, bearings in a cage, open side of the cage in, so the centrifugal force to hold the grease in the balls. I used my Tri-Flow synthetic grease, trusty handy dandy. Where did I set the grease all of a sudden? I put my Tri-Flow red grease on the thrust bearings. I really like this stuff. Holds up really well. When I pull the heads apart for doing maintenance, it's still in pretty good shape. Use that on the thrust bearings. And then of course when you do your assembly of the main parts here, put a little of the clear Tri-Flow grease on the dampeners and the spindle. Just keep everything moving freely. Can help with vibes at low RPMs. I misspoke earlier. I said this was a 12 millimeter main shaft. Upon further inspection, it is in fact just a 10, but it's not hollow. It's a solid shaft. You've got keys for your Jesus bolts on the head and the pulley, but solid 10 millimeter hardened steel main. I'm sure it's every bit as strong as a 12 millimeter on my X7 was. You know, it's solid. Not a lot of holes in it. We don't have any double keys or ability to step the size of the head down a little bit, so it's a solid shaft. Should hold up really well. One other thing I want to talk about real quick with the Swashplate, one thing that really impressed me when I pulled this apart, they actually give you, and I don't know how well you can see this in the video, and first of all I apologize for the bandages on my fingers. I have psoriasis real bad and it's cracking right now, so I got some band-aids on. Don't mind those. They give you a really short ball for the inner swash and some long balls for the inner swash. You have enough long balls to do all 4 long, a couple of short ones, so that you can really mix with the resolution. With the Furion, I put all 4 long balls on and was able to get 8 degrees no problem in the green on my V-bar. So I will probably start with the 4 long balls. If I have any troubles with resolution, I have the short balls to resort back to. But that's a nice touch. I was really impressed with that. Alright, well here we are, Swashplate together. I was completely not looking at this correctly. I didn't even look at the manual wrong. All 4 longer arm balls do go on the inner swash. The 3 short balls go on the outer swash. And that makes sense. It's exactly how my Furion 6 was set up. Resolution was not a problem with that. I was just thinking wrong. I guess you could probably order more of the short balls and put them on there if you needed more resolution, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. It certainly wasn't with the Furion. All metal swash, it goes together well. Got the 3 set screws in there so you can adjust out any slop, and this swash bearing should show up. Nice hardened steel swash pin, which is going to go into the anti-rotation bracket and keep that from turning on you. Really well built swash. I'm not going to put the links together. The manual's got me doing the links next. I'm going to hold off on those till I'm doing the head setup. I always do that at the same time. That way I can level the center the servos, level the swash, level the head. I save those for almost last. So that pretty much wraps up the head stuff. Just really well built. So far everything's going well to good. Next we're going to move on to, I believe it has me skip to the frames next. I'm going to get past the fly bar parts. It has me do the tail next, but I'm probably going to skip ahead to the frame. Yeah, we'll do the frames next. Okay, starting on the frame stuff. Talk about the carbon for a second. This is really thick stuff. Looks 2 mil layered carbon. Several layers there. Strong stuff. Not a lot of give. It's all high quality carbon. The main frames themselves are massive. I mean, just look at that frame. Turn so you can see. They're going to be the left side frame right there. Absolutely massive frame. Very well machined. Not a lot of sharp edges. Now I'm going to sand these edges a little bit. I like to be creative when I run my wires, and the last thing I want is a servo wire to fray coming across a corner, battery wire, anything really. So I'll be getting creative with that. But good quality carbon. Pin nuts already pressed in where necessary, I noticed. That's a good touch. Looks like a lot of open areas, plenty of creative places to mount things. See lots of strap places, that's for the batteries. This plates here for the ESCs and whatnot. You've got plenty of loopholes. See lots of loopholes here and here for, looks like electronics placements. It's just really good done, really well done. Alright, well, we made some progress on the frames. I've got the carbon addressed here. We've got a bottom plate, a battery tray, actually battery tray, bottom plate, ESC mount, gyro tray. One thing I found interesting, the gyro tray is mounted the same way as the other pieces of carbon with these, well, they're round tubes. They're one side's flattened, which go into the frame, but they actually use plastic and Phillips coarse thread screws with a little CA on them. I'm not sure what the thought process is there, to be totally honest with you. I guess maybe because I think plastic, it'll absorb some of the vibes rather than the metal transferring. I'm not sure. Just make sure you follow the instructions carefully and put some CA on the threads of these Phillips. So once you get them tight, you don't have to strip them to get them tight enough to hold. And then the CA will keep them from backing out over time. But interesting on there. Next up, we're going to start putting pieces together with the frame, and this thing will start looking like the frame of a helicopter. Nothing's really jumping out at me as a problem so far. Everything's gone together. The bags are clearly labeled, as we've talked about before. Really curious on this sprag setup for one-way bearing. Having the one-way bearing built into the pinion. They call it a sprag gear. I've never seen that before personally. We're going to experience that here shortly. I'll make sure to take some video of that. But this is pretty straightforward stuff. It's a pretty common way to mount these frames I'm seeing now. Solid pieces of CA with these aluminum braces that the side frames bolt through here. Got some recessed cap screws. This is the battery tray, I think. Yeah, it looks like the battery tray. So this has got some recess that the batteries can slide through without catching. The bottom plate, regular old cap screws, so there's no real need to worry about snagging there. But so far so good. I'm impressed with the build quality. All of the parts, the main bearing assemblies, again, high quality brushed aluminum. The sealed radial bearings and main bearings are already in place. Now I will just check those for Loctite just to be sure, since that will have screws retaining that one. And then we do have a third main bearing brace, so we got lots of support for the main shaft. You know, going together really well. Not taking a whole lot of video at this stage, just little pieces here and there, because I don't know about you, but it's a little boring watching somebody turn screws. So I'll keep assembling piece by piece and cutting in and giving you a commentary, and we'll keep going. Thanks. Hey guys, I actually just stumbled across something that almost caused me some troubles. I was putting my ESC plate on the main frame, and I was trying to put the bolts through, and noticed they weren't fitting. Pay particular attention on page 24 of the manual when you're putting these CF plates together. There are actually two different versions of these braces, and the only thing that's different is one has a 3mm hole, one has a 4mm hole. That might be 2.5mm, but one is smaller than the other. These 4mm have to go on the base plate on the ends. Presumably the bigger bolts for the landing struts. So catch that. I didn't. I ended up with both 4mm on my ESC plate and wonder why it wouldn't go together. So quick note, pay attention to that. One other thing, while I got the camera on, something I found interesting. The gyro mount is mounted to the main frame with more of those Phillips screws. Watch your CA on those. Make sure you don't over tighten them and strip them. The CA will keep them from coming out. Also, here's something I haven't seen anything other than a nitro bird. The rudder servo is in the nose. Presumably there's going to be some linkage that comes back to this job. And then this comes through, and your tail control rod actually is on this pivot. It's a pretty common setup in a nitro bird. I guess they figured it works fine in nitro. Why not carry it forward? They do make a nitro and a gas version of this heli. So I guess they were just keeping things simple and keeping everything out of the middle, so less parts to redesign, I guess. It's interesting. It's going together pretty well, though. I like it. Just pay close attention on these frame pieces, because there is some differences. Okay, well here we are. We've got one whole side of the frame put together. Couple things to talk about real quick. One, this piece across the bottom at this stage only has the center screw holding it in, so be careful. This will move around. I got that one good and tight with Loctite, so it shouldn't rotate, but these ends are loose. Be aware of that so you don't accidentally grab it with the wrong place and break it off. The other thing that I thought the manual could have been a little clearer on was the placement of these posts, these frame supports that don't really have any CF on them. So I'm going to talk to those in the video real quick. The two bottom ones are real easy to index because these frame stiffening pieces that go around either side of the frame at the landing strut mounting location, the very top hole of both of those is where the bottom supports go. That is used to locate the CF supports as well as hold everything in place. Nice, makes the bottom of this frame very rigid. The pictures in the manual were really kind of fuzzy, particularly with this first one. It almost looked like they wanted you to put this CF reinforcement on the inside of the frame, which of course didn't make any sense to me. And when I flip the page on the manual, it shows a better view of this on the outside. This minor, it's right in the manual, I just didn't think it was very clear. The other thing to keep in mind, the tray for the battery, make sure this is obvious, but make sure you put the end with the extra slots towards the front. That's per the manual. I guess this is for running servo wires, give you extra room for cabling. Maybe they think you can put an RX pack up there, I'm not sure. But that the correct orientation of the battery tray is the extra slots towards the nose. And again, I was right. This battery does load from the back, so this plate has rounded heads rather than cap screws, so it's not catching on the battery. It makes sense. Pretty straightforward. One other thing, they do have you put the lower main shaft bearing in at this point. Don't CF that. This bottom one, you can see that moving. This is how you would do some adjustments. Depending upon what shims you use in the main shaft, the alignment, you'll have to adjust this to get the slop out of the main gear. So you're not going to want to tighten that up. So I did not put Loctite on those bolts yet. They're just finger tight. It will slide. When I go to put the main shaft in, I get this adjusted, snug it down, and then go remove them one by one, Loctite them, crank them down. That's pretty straightforward, standard procedure, but make sure you remember that. Don't Loctite those yet. They need them moving at this point. Looks like the next step of the manual's got me putting the top two main bearings in, as well as the braces for the servos. So we're going to start working on that mess. I'm trying to get the main frame together in this first video. If I can get the main frame together, I've already got the head together, I think that'll be a good stopping point for tonight, and we'll work on the tail and the boom tomorrow. So next time you see me, I'll have the main bearings on. Alright, one thing to touch on real quick. The manual has got me putting the anti-rotation bracket at the upper servo mount, and that all mounts to the upper main shaft. Keep in mind the main bearing with the retaining screws is the top bearing. That's helps that bearing in place. The other two are captured by the hub. This one's got a bit of a space between the top and the middle, so that one's retained. The ends are threaded on both sides. Pretty straightforward. The servo mounts actually become part of this, and this whole assembly goes into the frame. The one I wanted to point out real quick, the kit comes with these CF shims. Per the manual, these shims go here between the servo mount and the upper main bearing to help space the servos, but those shims are to only be used with JR servos. Manual says specifically to only use this part if you're using JR servos. Now I'm using the Futaba BLS 451s that we talked about, so I will not need this shim, but make sure you check if you're using a JR or for that matter I bet a Spectrum servo, you're going to need this to get proper 90 degree on your swash linkage. Just wanted to point that out. Well, here it is, one whole half of the frame together. I got all three main shaft braces in place, gyro mount, ESC mount, battery tray, bottom plate, again the linkage pivot point for the tail control. The anti-rotation bracket is built into the top main plate, which is also the mounting for the aileron and pitch servos. Pretty straightforward. I actually like the way that goes together. Very strong. There's a piece of CF brace here across the back to help brace the back side of these main blocks. Very rigid. I like it. You got big 3mm bolts on the sides, and all the way around. You've got a little longer ones in the front here because they have to come through the, I believe they're 16mm, excuse me, 10. These are 3x10s on the brackets holding the will become the mounts for the servos. They're a little longer, it's got more metal to go through. Again, still a fine thread 3mm metric cap screw. Very, very sturdy. So far, nothing really out of the ordinary. I don't see any astounding feats of engineering just yet, but it's a very clean build so far. I mean, the frame's basically together. Slap the other side on, deal with the motor mount and the pinion and pinion support bearing, and that sprag gear. And the basic frame is there. It's, again, very solid. I'm so far impressed. Hopefully things continue this smoothly, and we'll get the this bird finished up tomorrow night. I'm gonna next time we speak, I'll have the other side of the frame in it. No, correction. Next I have is doing the motor mount and the sprag gear. So I guess I'm going to get to play with that. I might actually hold off on doing that until I get the motor. I've got to work out bullets, do some soldering. I'm not going to bore you guys with talking about that or watching me do that. I want to read over the instructions on this sprag gear very carefully. So I think what I'm actually going to do next, since where the motor goes on this bird is pretty wide open, is easy to get to being right here, I think I'm going to go ahead and button up the frame and do the sprag gear and pinion after the frame is together when I'm messing with my electronics. I might regret that later, I don't know. We'll see how it goes when we start putting things together, but I really want to get the main frame done tonight and up on its skids, so we can get an idea what the frame looks like. So next time we see it, I'll have the other side of the frame on and be talking about skids. Alright guys, here we are, roughly hour and a half in. I've got the entire frame structure together. Don't have it on the skids yet. I tend to do those pretty close to last. I don't like having the frame sit up way high on the table. It's easier to manipulate and hold in my hands like this. When I get I'll do the struts after I get the servo wires run, because sometimes I hold it like this, or like turn it like this, or run like this. I'm getting creative with this with electronics. I do things a little out of order of the manual, but that's cool. It ends up in a complete heli at the end. Initial thoughts on the build so far. You know, I can see why they call it a low parts count machine. The frame was very simplistic, solid CF across the sides, thick. I don't see a lot of places that scare me about breaking in a crash. I see we haven't gotten that far in instructions yet, but I noticed it's got breakaway canopy mounts. I can see the setups for that. That's perfect. The servos layout's pretty straightforward. You've got the aileron and pitch servos are in the front, elevators in the rear. That's what I personally consider a normal Swashplate layout. I guess it really doesn't matter if the elevator's out front. That's just not what I don't know. I seem to prefer it the other way. Whatever. Very beefy parts, brushed aluminum all the way around. Again, the plastic and the gyro mount, not really sure what to think about that just yet, but I'm sure they had their reasons. If nothing else, it probably keeps the costs down a little bit. Very interested to see how we get from Rudder Servo up here to this linkage back here. I'm assuming it's just going to be a push rod of some sort, but I'm sure that must be in the tail kit, because I don't see it in my linkage stuff. But that's cool. Again, something's carried over from the Nitro birds. I've never owned a Nitro heli, so be my first experience with the extra linkage in the tail. All in all, pretty good. Goes together pretty well. Nothing doesn't line up. Nothing I had to modify. I didn't have any screws that didn't want to fit. I'm not short anything. They give you lots of extras. All in all, pretty good build. What we're going to do next, tomorrow's video will have me mounting some electronics. I'm going to really pour over the instructions on this Sprag gear. It doesn't look overly complicated. Looks like I've got a pinion and it's one-way bearing and a cage of some sorts, kind of reminiscent of a clutch on a Nitro, if you ask me. But I'll tear through it tomorrow. I want to look through the instructions, read online about it. I know some people have had to make some adjustments to their shafts to get the scrub screw in all right. I'm just going to look it over real thoroughly and then put it together and talk about it on video. If I come across anything out of the ordinary or that it just doesn't make sense, I'll make sure you guys know about it, but I'm not anticipating that at all. So that's going to conclude the first video. Thanks for spending some time with me, and I'm going to get some sleep and get home from work tomorrow. We'll tear into the next step. Thanks.